Welcome back to Kings of Columbus. Doug Lamereese and Bill Landis. 10 truths, Landis, about Ohio State football. We're just laying it out there. Truths. Mm-hmm. We like truth, right? We manipulate. No, I don't want to start off with the word manipulate. Sometimes on here, like you have opinions, right? And they might not all be true, but we are trying to establish, like, this is different than facts. But these are things that we had our tech subscribers send in that, like, this is a truth about Ohio State football. It's not they averaged 5.1 yards per carry in 2024, right?
Those are the truths that I like.
Tego Shabola's PFF grade was this. Yeah, no, that's a different show. So I could almost see us doing something like this every year, like resetting the truths about a program. But a decent number of the ones that I chose, and we'll also talk about some of the ones that I didn't choose, and we're going to debate, like, is this a truth or not? A lot of them are program-wide that don't really change year to year. So if we did do this every year, and we were back here in February of 2026 doing the same thing, we might be repeating a couple. There are some that are specific to 2025, but there are a lot that are Bill, like almost tent poles for what Ohio State football as a program is about.
Yeah, and it would take a lot for those to change, I think.
Yes.
I don't want to jump the gun because one of them I think gets to the heart of that. But yeah, tent poles that are sort of like absolute truths about Ohio State, almost no matter what kind of condition the program's in.
Yes. So a lot of great, smart, dedicated, educated, loyal Ohio State fans sent in things. I read them. I couldn't include all of them. I included as many as I can. We'll talk about some more after the 10. And then Bill and I will each give one at the end. And I did cheat a little bit and sort of like save one from a fan. That's kind of the thing that I was thinking about. Stealing from the fans again.
Let's
start with
you.
this.
You went through them all, so it's fair. You can do that.
Yeah. Here's number one. Ohio State has positioned itself to be the face of the sport. This is from Dakota B. Dakota went on to say, with Nick Saban retiring, it feels like Ohio State is the new boogeyman. Ohio State will recruit as well as anyone. They will spend NIL as well as anyone. And with Day breaking through, they will be as well coached as anyone. Face of the sport is different than best team, I think, but it's the thing we've talked about a lot with, I think, Alabama in the past, Bill. Maybe the road goes through you, right? That you're either competing at the top of the sport, and if you're not winning it, a lot of other teams are saying to themselves, if we want to win it, we're going to have to beat them. Does this feel like a truth to you?
It does, and I would couch it as, if you were walking down the street and grabbed some random person who's like, interest in college football, you were unsure of it, and said like, hey, college football. And they would say, probably 5 years ago, Nick Saban, Alabama, right?
Yes.
And now they might say Ohio State.
Right.
Like I think like defining program, right? This doesn't mean you're winning the championship every single year, because we know that's difficult. But like you said, the road goes through you. You're always kind of in the mix there, which I would expect Ohio State to be in a world where 12 teams, if not, and perhaps more than that, or definitely more than that, moving forward, will make the playoff. And part of it is like Ryan Day's status too. I think now is a national championship winning head coach. All of it, I think, leads to this point. I don't know. I don't think I'd say that they're like all the way there yet. Like if it's like fully picked up that mantle from Alabama, but the way that this is written is like positioned to be. I think that's right.
Yes.
Like that's the opportunity that I think awaits Ohio State maybe this year.
That is key here, right? Because I was trying to sort of explain to the texters what we're looking for here. It's not a prediction, right? It's a set of things that are in place right now. And I think it is almost indisputable. I think it's a truth that Ohio State is positioned to be this. As the defending national champs, with their NIL in shape, the fact that the North has risen up and it does not have to be a Southern dominated sport anymore, with the way the recruiting is going, with the way they've been strategic in the transfer portal, with the 12-team playoff, and what had happened in the 4-team playoff was often they were 5, 6, 7 and on the edge of getting in, but not getting in. I think every box is checked for this to happen. Now they just have to make it happen. Because if we're having this conversation about what teams are positioned, and Dakota used a great word here, what teams are positioned to be the faith of the sport. And you're going through, you're checking all the boxes for everybody. I don't think anybody else, any other program would check as many boxes as Ohio State. So the opportunity is there. Now they just have to go do it. But by the way, also, would you say, if Ohio State's taking this, who are they taking it from? Are they taking it from Bama or are they taking it from Georgia? Because Georgia 1-2 almost made it in 2023. And a lot of people during the course of the 2023 season were still like, I'll take Georgia versus the field kind of conversations. That happened all the way through 2023. And then Georgia was the 2 seed in 2024.
I think Ohio State and Georgia are battling to wrestle it away from not wrestle it away from Alabama. It is available. Alabama's not going to take it back, but I think it's those two programs trying to figure out who's going to be the one.
Yeah. And I think face of the sport also, there is some, I think, blue blood history. There's a couple other truths that work into this. Mm-hmm. Ohio State's just a bigger national brand than Georgia. Yeah. They're easier. So if you're looking for like, well, what could a USC fan relate to? What could a Texas fan relate to? What could a Minnesota fan and a Florida State fan relate to? I think Ohio State has a broader, and appeal's the wrong word, but a broader, like a Q rating, right? That like we know, we have an opinion on them, right? Maybe more so even than Georgia, which just does not have the same type of 50-year, 80-year history that Ohio State does.
Yes, that's probably true. I would say that like I actually don't know what do they call the Georgia logo. It's not the block G, but I'm going to call it that. Like I think that's like fairly recognizable, I think. Although other programs, I guess, use it. I guess there's only one block O. So you're right. Ohio State does have more like brand notoriety and history than Georgia. That helps.
Now you're making me look. What's the difference between the Georgia G and the Packers G? Nothing.
Yeah,
right.
Nothing. I think they're pretty similar. And Grambling, I think, uses the same G as well.
And Glenville.
Glenville
High School. That's like if you show me that G, having covered Ohio football, including some Ohio high school stuff for 20 years, if you showed me that G, I'd be like, that's Glenville. And then I'd be like, no, it's the Packers. And then I think I'd get to Georgia. They don't even own their G. They're not even the face of their letter. How can they be the face of the sport? That's now we're doing, we'll do an alphabet show. Oh, I keep saying this. I'm going to write down stuff. Alphabet show. Do we do it for just college football? I guess we do. When you say a letter, what do you think of? If we were writing an alphabet book for young college football fans, A is for what? Right? And we do that for 26 letters.
Akron.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And I think Ohio State owns the O. Mike Gundy would be like, I don't know. And I don't know. But like Ohio State, O is for Ohio State if it's a college football book. Oh, yeah. Are we sure G is for Georgia? We'll have to think about it. Now we're doing another
That's the name of the book. That's the name of the book. Are we sure G is for Georgia?
Probably K is for Kirby, though. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't just have to be teams. It's what represents the sport. Alphabet show. We'll break it up into 7 shows, 4 letters a show. Welcome back. We're doing FGH. Is this one of those? If I said right now, like, does P come before or after R? Could you answer that question without singing the alphabet song in your head?
Does P come before R? Yes. I could. Yeah.
I could not do that. I couldn't do it. Like if I just said, name a group, say a group of 4 straight letters right now and get it right without singing the song. Go.
TUVW.
Okay. So, but you kind of sang the song. So I couldn't do it. I'm pretty locked in on the alphabet right now too with a 2-year-old. So, but that's the thing I am learning with the 2-year-old. Like kids' books are a scam, man. Like they're so simple. This is absolutely a book. It's just an alphabet with college football logos. We have to pay, I guess, to get the logos themselves, but this is a book. And Brought to you by KOTN. We're knocking out 4 of the 26 right there. It's 26 letters, right? 26 letters?
Yes.
26 letters, 28 teams? Come on. Printing money over here. All right. Dakota, bringing us in hot. Number 2. Second truth about Ohio State football. Ohio State is poised to make an unprecedented run in school history. This is Dave C. It says, due to the expanded playoff, NAL focus, great young coaches blended with successful older coaches, and great leadership from Ryan Day, who I believe is not only a great coach, but an outstanding human. The paralyzing pressure of the Michigan game is going to be a non-factor due to the results of the playoff run in 2024. Poised. Brady S., along the same lines, continued, said Ohio State football at this very moment is more ready than it has ever been to take over college football. Lots of reasons here. I'm pushing my chips all in on the Ryan Day dynasty, said Brady S. And then Bill in Salem, Massachusetts, Ohio State is better positioned than it ever has been to be a dynasty. Jim Tressel was too conservative. Urban Meyer always burned himself out. If reports were correct, Day was ruthless and driving to accept no excuses. If he keeps it up, maybe he can be a friendlier Saban and constantly push coaches. So this is, again, poised is a word that matters, I think, here. Ohio State is poised for the best run in school history. What do you think of that?
I'm on board with it. This gets into a little bit of like what my truth is about Ohio State at the moment, which I guess I'll try to say for the end. But I really think that Ryan Day figured out very quickly what Ohio State has to be in a 12-team playoff world. And then not only did he devise what I thought was like a very good plan for that, but then they won it all in the first year of it. Like they got proof of concept immediately. And I think it's repeatable. I think it'll be copied, which might make it more difficult to be repeatable. But I think they're on it. And you have to navigate the staff changes and stuff like that. I'm aware of that. I'm not saying they're going to win a national title every year. But I think the ability to be quote unquote in the mix is a little easier now. So I guess we have to recalibrate our brains a little bit on what that means. So that part of it is true. It's like Ohio State always fancies itself a national title caliber team. Obviously, it's not always in position to go play for, but more often than not, now it will be. So that's different. And I think Dave and everyone else who thinks that it'll be sort of a new era of Ohio State football when it comes to success and how we define it, and Ohio State more consistently being at the top. And not that it ever had dips, but it had minor sort of ebbs and flows, I guess. I think we'll see fewer of those, and probably, I guess I would say if Ohio State will probably win another national championship before or in the next decade, which would then put it in a different spot because typically it wins them every 10, 11 years or something like that.
Poised is the key word here, but the thing I like about this and the way that Dave framed it is it's comparing Ohio State against itself.
Yeah.
So we're having a similar conversation about Ohio State's is the best right now and is poised and is ready to be the best. But the idea here of an unprecedented run in school history, part of this is because when you look back at history, I think definitively, right? You would start in 68, the second half of Woody is the best run in school history. But that best run in school history included 4 Rose Bowl losses, several of which kept Ohio State from winning other national championships. So when you look at this 9-year period from Woody, their final rating in the AP poll starting with 68, because Ohio State in 3 straight years, 65, 66, 67, didn't finish in the top 25 in the top 20 at the end of the year. Okay. Then they win the national championship in 68. 69, they're undefeated. They go lose to Michigan. They finish 4th. 70, they claim a national title there, but it's pretty fraudulent because they lost the Rose Bowl. But it's one of the 8. We're not having that conversation today. They finish 5th in the AP poll, but they claim a national title. 71, they have a step back year. But then 72, they lose the Rose Bowl. They finish 9th. 73, they win the Rose Bowl. They finish 2nd. 74, they lose the Rose Bowl. They finish 4th. 75, they lose the Rose Bowl. They finish 4th. 76, they win the Orange Bowl and finish 6th. That's a 9-year period where they finish in the top 10, 8 of 9 years, and could have had multiple national championships in there. Instead, they have like 1.5. They have 2 that they count. I think that's the barometer for the way Dave phrased it. Unprecedented run in school history. So are they poised to be better than the second half of Woody? And that's where I would say, yes, they are. Now, doesn't mean they're going to do it, but they have that ability. If Woody had won 4 national titles in the last decade of his career, I think all the other things that we're talking about with Ohio State would still be in place, but this might not be true. Because as we would be comparing Ohio State to itself, we'd be like, well, I don't know. They're going to win 4 national titles in a decade. Woody has, you know what I mean? Like Woody set a standard that it can't ever be beaten. And that whatever anybody would do would tie it. And so we couldn't have the word unprecedented. So now it's like, thanks, Woody, for blowing those Rose Bowls. Doug did a show where he ripped Woody for blowing Rose Bowls. We've covered some of that. People who have some understanding of Ohio State history, and I know there's a lot of younger people here, and I'm not an expert on it, but they got to the Rose Bowl a bunch of years where they were favored to win, and if they won, they would have won or shared or had a claim to a national title, and they didn't win. So that's why I think this is true. For as great as Ohio State is and as consistent as Ohio State is, they have not had a run like a Saban run. Right?
Or even like a Dabo run. Yeah. Even like
stacking. Right. They made 3 national championships in 4 years and won 2 of them.
Yeah. I guess they came close because like Tress won in 2002 and then went back-to-back years within 5 years of that, right? Like he was close.
If they would have won both those, if it was like poised to have an unprecedented run, you mean like when Ohio State won in 02, 06, and 07?
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, okay. They won 3 out of 6. No, this is not true. But it's an interesting part of Ohio State history, and we've talked about this, but I think it was worth reinforcing, which is why I use Dave C. and these other smart texters. As consistent as they have been at the top of the sport, they have not had just the absolute hammer. We owned multiple national titles, kind of owned. They haven't had a dynasty, and they could.
They definitely could. Yeah.
Truth number 3. Ohio State is the most hated team in college football. This is from Eric W. Even at Saban's height, Ohio State was still more hated. A single loss has always mattered more when it has been to Ohio State than other teams. And Southern honks band together and support their stupid teams more than respectable Northern media folks. But especially between 2015 and 2019, there was a near irrational hatred of Ohio State in the national picture. So this is sort of trying to get to the viewpoint of college football. Most hated team in college football. That a truth?
I don't know. Because when I hear that, I think like, well, who's like been the villain in college football? Like I don't know that Ohio State's my answer for that. But I guess my perspective on it is different too. So I don't want to be dismissive of it. I think they like maybe will become that. But I think when Saban had it going, it was Alabama. Even with the silly SEC chants from other programs that like trying to ride Alabama's coattails. Like I still think Alabama was the most hated program, and I think for a time like Clemson picked that up because Dabo's very hateable. I don't know. Like I don't think Ryan Day is hateable, is he? He doesn't have that. I don't think he has that like kind of personality that would like make opposing fan bases feel that way. Maybe with the exception of Michigan for obvious reasons, but I don't know. I'm not sure I'm 100% on board with this one. Like I get it, but I don't know that it's actually all the way true.
It is interesting because I do think it's more than success and it's more than brand. It's like evil empire kind of stuff. But I think even as it relates to a brand and a program, I still think you need faces of that. So like when the Yankees were maybe at their most hated, it's like George Steinbrenner was a face of that.
Yeah.
And that guy was like a caricature, and he fired everybody, and he seemed like kind of a jerk. And so even if you only had a brushing knowledge of the Yankees, you might be like, I also hate that guy. And then they were successful, right, in various periods. So I do think so. Ohio State's history, right? They've been consistent. They've been at the top of the sport. Their most famous coach punched a player.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a fact. And I would imagine there's probably like a lot of college fans who didn't love that and might think like, God, Ohio State is going around punching players. Then, I don't think Earl Bruce had that kind of thing. And then Cooper couldn't beat Michigan. But Tressel, Ohio State fans love Tressel. I think a lot of other fans thought Tressel was sanctimonious. And then when he got his comeuppance, and again, whatever you think of that, he lost his job because of NCAA violations. For a guy who had presented himself as like the straight and narrow, I think a lot of fans relish that, right?
Yeah.
And that was like, who was a villain? It's like there was certainly like Jim Tressel could be viewed as a villain, like a hiding in plain sight behind the sweater vest kind of thing. That would have been the documentary. Behind the sweater vest, the real story. And again, like what part of that is actually true, I don't know. But I think that was probably a view from the outside, which would add to Ohio State being hated. Do you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely.
And then Urban.
Yeah, Urban. Urban's evil. I think Urban's Ohio State was evil empire, maybe.
Yes, and Urban's. It's not behind the sweater vest. There's no behind. It's on the front. It's like he's coming at you, being hated because he had established a thing to kind of hate at Florida with A, success, and B, a bunch of players getting in trouble during the success. And that combination, succeeding while it is at least perceived that you are breaking rules to help yourself succeed, I think is the best way to become hated in college football. So I'm trying to think, are there any programs right now that would be succeeding and breaking rules that a lot of people would hate? I'm trying to think. Can you think of any? What's this? Oh, I haven't put this on in a while.
No, that's not where I was going.
That's not where you were going? Where are you going?
Team very famously just won a national championship while breaking rules.
Oh. Well, so that's the thing. No, I'm talking about speeding rules. If you're listening on the pod, the Dog Mentality hat is on. So, but we have, before Ohio State, the three previous national champions, Georgia, Michigan, have more off-field, are you doing things wrong, things in the zeitgeist than Ohio State does.
Yeah.
So then like, what's the case? Like Ryan Day as Lou Holtz, right? It's like, what's Ryan Day's most hateable thing? And we understand Michigan fans would say, well, like the whole thing his brother turned into Michigan that they thought happened, that it turns out didn't happen. And the end, it says in the report that it came from inside Michigan's program, and Michigan even agreed to that. So that didn't happen. But like the most real thing that's like, oh God, I hate that guy, is probably yelling at Lou Holtz, right? And so, I don't think that compares to a big cheating investigation that is still ongoing. And what we have talked about a lot on KOTN, and we think people don't talk about enough, is like the two-time national champion putting the people in their community in danger, including an incident that led tragically to the death of a player. So I think those are all part of hating programs. You have to have a little more than just winning. And to your point, lately, Ohio State hasn't had as much of that.
No, they just have the winning, which is great. they have the part of it that you want. People are envious of that, and people don't like Ohio State for that. I think that's right. I wonder how much of this this truth too might stem from. I agree sometimes that maybe like national college football media does tend to like use Ohio State as an example for a lot of things that sometimes maybe it does make sense, other times it doesn't make sense. Ohio State drives a lot of eyeballs and clicks and stuff like that. Like it's good business to write about Ohio State, whether it's good or bad. So that's where it comes from. But I think that may be part of the perspective here too. But I don't know, like, and maybe I'm totally wrong, but if you polled 1,000 college football fans around the country and said, which program do you hate the most? I don't know that Ohio State's the answer.
And I feel like if you do answer Ohio State, it maybe is remnants of what we talked about previously. That it is more. Well, I started hating him. You've got to be older to say I started hating because of Woody, but that or Tressel or Urban. If it's more recent, I don't know. You know, if you said like, well, why do you hate him? You know what these people hate though? The
Yeah.
They still do the on the intros. Not helping the case. But I think Ohio State like that. That's part of why they do it, right?
Yeah. Well, it's Ohio State's thing. Like sorry, you don't have a thing.
No, but I mean, like trying to own. They tried to trademark the word "the," right? It's like, come on. There's a lot of that that's like, come on. I mean, if you were not an Ohio State fan, everyone watching and listening to this, if you weren't Ohio State and Michigan or Clemson or Alabama was like trying to trademark the word "the," you'd go crazy. And then you guys named it The Podcast and just leaned right into it. It's like, we'll be hated.
Yeah. We sure did.
We think then this is not a truth. We presented it. I get Eric W's case. I get it. But we would not put this on our truth list.
I don't think that I would right now. No. Yeah.
I think it's possible, but I think like for it to be a truth, right? Slam dunk, no doubt about it. Probably we're not quite there. All right, number 4. Ohio State should be the betting favorite for the national championship heading into 2025. This is Jake C. No one is more stacked at the offensive skill positions. I believe Brian Hartline will use his guys in space, and often a lot of people are scared of the defense regressing back to the Combs days, but the talent is much deeper across all 3 levels. I think we see the potency of the 2018 offense with a better run game and a much better defense. So this is Jake like making the case. And again, this does not mean Ohio State will win the national championship. But if you are trying to assess college football teams right now, which is what we do every day, Ohio State should be the betting favorite. Do you believe that's the truth?
Yeah, I do. I think so. We discussed on KOTN like how many teams like do we think are actually title contenders? I think you said 5 and I said 6 because I included Clemson. And Clemson like is number 1 in the country in returning production and like has a quarterback and a championship winning head coach. But I don't think you can make Clemson the national title favorite when like they haven't been part of the conversation for 5 years, right? So like I think they're like dangerous and sneaky and probably will be in it by the end, but they shouldn't be the favorite now. So then you look at the teams that like it makes sense. Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Oregon. I think Ohio State should be above all of those teams. Based on the fact that it just won it, based off what like comparatively all those teams have coming back. Penn State has a lot coming back too, but it's again like they've never been in the championship conversation in this modern era, so I don't think you can make them the favorite either. So yes, long answer, but I agree. I think this is true.
And I do think like we fell into a thing with the Georgia titles where it was like Georgia won the title and then just like Georgia was the favorite the next year. And I don't actually think that's the right way to analyze college football. But if we're talking about betting favorite, because too much changes in the offseason, just like automatically say the defending national champ should be the betting favorite. But it does happen sometimes. And I don't know why you wouldn't give then Ohio State that benefit of the doubt that you gave previous champions. They are. Sure. FanDuel, they're plus 600. Texas and Oregon are plus 650. So this is, Jake is saying they should be. They are. At the moment, the betting favorite. And we think a truth is, given the way the sport is analyzed, what Ohio State has done and what Ohio State has a chance to be, this is a truth. I think we're united on this. I don't know that there's a lot of debate here. That someone wants to come in and be like, oh, that's so stupid. It should be, because I guess like, it should be Georgia instead. It's like, why? Well, why? Based on the fact that they got freaking waxed?
The only other one that I think you can make like a really compelling argument for is Texas.
Yeah, but they lost more. I mean, they lost as many dudes as Ohio State did, and when they played, Ohio State won. So yeah, but I mean, to your point, you can make a case, but I think most of the cases, as you try to make cases, it's like, well, no, I still think Ohio State. Doesn't mean they're going to win it. Betting favorite, I think, is right. All right, number 5. This is from Jordan H. Ohio State's lunatic fans are not a bad thing at all. This is defense of the lunatic fringe. Jordan says it's actually a good thing, and it's what makes college football the best sport on earth. But most importantly, without the lunatic fans, Ohio State wouldn't have the standard it has. Fans make change happen. Fans won't settle for above average teams. The fans wanting a natty title type of contending team every year and having that be the standard is what makes Ohio State so special, and at least some of the reason Ohio State has been a blue blood ever since Woody was around. So, Jordan, to that point, he's saying, like, for instance, Oregon's a good school, but it doesn't have the standard Ohio State has. And that fans upholding and demanding that standard from the program, which means when you don't meet it, they get mad. And then we end up having the discussions that a lot of, everybody knows what we're talking about. Not a bad thing. What do you think? Is that a truth?
Yes, because I would assume, because I think Jordan here is like putting lunatic in air quotes.
Yes,
as if to suggest like it was too broadly applied to the fan base as a whole, which like I think that's right. Like the passion and I guess like the accountability that Ohio State fans ask of its program, I don't think is a bad thing. If you want to get in the true lunatic conversation, like wishing harm on Ryan Day and his family, of course that's not a good thing. Yeah. But upholding a standard and wanting Ohio State to meet it, which by the way, like Ohio State is the one that sets that. Like the fans are just picking up the ball from the program, right? Like when they tell you what the standard is, and the fans.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Hold it to
are they?
I think so.
What's the chicken or the egg in the discussion there? What sets a program's standard? Because I think you could argue that Ohio State knows if it's not competing at the top of the sport, it's going to lose money, right? That its fans aren't going to turn out and buy merchandise and buy tickets and make it a popular television property if they go 8-4 every year. So Ohio State, it's sort of like we have to spend money to make money. We have to put in the resources to be good. And then also those, quote, lunatic, passionate fans donate and give money to the program and help create the resources for Ohio State to compete at the highest level. I mean, there's not an answer here, but I just wanted to interrupt the idea of like, it starts with Ohio State inside the program and the fans follow that. I think it might be almost completely symbiotic where they're in lockstep together. That, it starts with Woody and it starts what was established. I mean, it starts with Wes Fessler and Paul Brown and everything that happened back then. And it starts with the fact that this is the flagship university of a state that really cares about football. It's one of the two states that cares about football the most in these United States. And it's, why isn't it? It's different in Indiana because Indiana's a basketball state. But now we're getting another conversation. Indiana basketball is to Ohio State football, except look at Indiana basketball in the last 30 years. Look at Indiana basketball. Man, I want to do this show now. Okay.
Yeah. Simply caring about it doesn't guarantee success. Case in point, Indiana basketball.
Indiana basketball post Bob Knight versus Ohio State football post Woody Hayes. So many comparisons there. With the success and the coaching deity, both of whom ended under odd circumstances, but yet one program then found a way over the next 50 years to stay relevant and the other has not. Is that a show? It's like a June show. That's the Kings of Columbus in June, right? Yeah. Not that we care about, but it's like you're trying to compare. If you're trying to, okay, now we're trying to do post legend. Which schools and sport, like Duke's in the midst of this right now, right? I'm sure there's somebody at Duke who's like done investigations of like post legend. How did schools function? Nebraska football, right? Didn't handle it as well. Like, what's the difference between Nebraska football with Bob Devaney, Tom Osborne, and Ohio State football with Woody Hayes? I guess there's probably some, Ohio has more people than Nebraska does as a state. But anyway.
But then you're just getting in. Are we getting back into the indestructible Ohio State conversation?
But I do which is the number one conversation. The number one conversation around Ohio State is indestructible Ohio State, and the number one conversation I think you could argue in North American sports is indestructible Ohio State. Anyway, but specifically about how to keep a program going after a legend, how much you lean into the legend, how much you distance yourself. What are the things you learn from that? Do you create a standard within the fan base thanks to that legend that then becomes a plus or maybe a minus? And this is relevant because there's all this stuff happening right now in the state of Indiana where Mike Woodson, the Indiana basketball coach, he's out at the end of the year. They've already announced that. But then like Matt Painter, the Purdue coach, Indiana just beat Purdue. And I think Matt Painter said a thing about Indiana fans. And I only saw headlines because I don't really care. But it was more, right? I think he was sort of saying like your passion is almost like hurting the program. You're demanding too much. Wasn't that it? Did you read it?
I didn't read. I caught wind of it. I think that feels like what the gist was. Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, that gets my whatever I'm supposed to get up gets. I get angry about that, right? They're like, how dare Indiana basketball fans who once upon a time, at least for some of the older ones, remember when Indiana was the gold standard of college basketball, and they have not been anything close to that in the last 30 years, but like they're too hard on Mike Woodson. Most of this stuff, when people yell at fans, it's usually announcers and fellow coaches trying to defend other coaches. And that's what it's about. And you're putting the coach, it's not fair to the coach, ahead of the fans. I don't know that I think Indiana fans are too crazy about stuff. Is this good enough for Indiana basketball? Who thinks this is good enough? And I don't know that it's Mike Woodson's fault, but like somebody has to be held accountable. So why are we yelling at fans again?
Didn't Thad Matta have a hand in hiring Mike Woodson? Maybe this was just an inside job. Thad's bringing down Indiana from the inside, and then he jetted to Butler.
And then he's setting himself up to get that job. Anyway, I think in the end, the program and the fans drive the program drives the fans. But in the end, are we accepting this as a truth that in quotation marks, lunatic fans are actually good? I certainly agree that it's not a bad thing. It needs to be measured and perhaps sometimes put in check a little bit, but that's not true for the majority of the passionate Ohio State fans. Yeah, and I do. I agree with this. This is a truth. We take this as a truth. And I don't think it only applies to Ohio State, but it's just like the lunatic fringe, thanks to Herbie, it's been applied to Ohio State, and it's been in the news the most. And I still don't know the specifics. Doesn't it feel? Sometimes I think about like the worst of the Ryan Day lunatic fans, like threatening his family stuff. Feels like a decent chunk of that was one absolute ding dong horrible person podcaster that said the most ridiculous thing you can say, and I think has not gotten still enough blowback for that. I'm not saying it was just one guy, but it feels like that guy's the face of this. Right. And it's an absolute unhinged maniac, lunatic. He's truly a lunatic. And I'm not, if the Day family felt threatened, that's horrible. But I don't even know, like, was it a 1,000 people expressing horrible things like that? Was it 100? Was it 50? Was it 20? Was it 10? Was it 5? Or was it one guy who has a platform who absolutely went off the deep end in an absolutely unhinged way? And I feel like it's a chunk, like he's the face of that at least, and that's a big part of it. Yeah. I think he's the biggest part of it. I wonder what percent of it, but it's like one horrible person. Now I'm not saying it's only that, but it's like sometimes it's like is it a lunatic fringe or is it a lunatic? It's like a lunatic. All right, point at that guy, and then maybe a little bit else. Okay. Number 6, Fox Big Noon hurts Ohio State and the Big Ten. This is Bill P. Instead of raising the national profile of other Big Ten teams, Fox just goes to the Ohio State ratings trough every week, making for a terrible viewing experience. Even Gus Johnson was sick of it. Who can forget his yawn of a call when Sawyer scooped and scored? Put some Ohio State games at night, they'd still beat whatever is going on in the SEC. Plus, it'd be more fun for fans and recruits. This was certainly a huge talking point during the season. It was not like in the top 10 things that I got wound up about, but because I'm sort of like in the you took the money. I don't know what else you're supposed to do, and I actually think noon games are fun, but it feels like can be fun, should be fun. It's not like every big game has to be at night, but it feels, Landis, like many people thought what Big Noon did with Ohio State this year and the biggest Big Ten games went too far. And the fact that Ohio State almost vanished from the prime time lineup was, even if you understood it, this was like a over the line. So do you agree with this as a truth? Big Noon hurts Ohio State in the Big Ten.
I agree with it as a truth. I think it hurts the Big Ten maybe generally more than it hurts Ohio State specifically. Because the thing when you talk about the impact on Ohio State that I think gets brought up the most is the impact on recruiting and like recruiting visits. And like, honestly, I just don't know how much that matters anymore.
Yeah.
Because what matters is how much money are you paying the recruits. And Ohio State does well there. So like, and the recruiting class was good despite having a lot of, it makes probably Mark Pantoni and on-campus recruiting coordinators' jobs more difficult, but
yeah,
I don't know that it has an adverse effect on Ohio State's ability to recruit actually. But I do think Bill makes a good point about not showcasing the league in the right way. And like, I get it. Like the thing with Ohio State though, is like, it's going to get eyeballs no matter what time you put it on. It's like, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like the noon window is the best window in college football. It's like, you put Ohio State there, put them at 3:30. Guess what the best window is going to be? It's going to be 3:30, right? So I think if you're Fox and like you want to make Big Noon this like thing that supersedes like college game day and is the biggest game of the college football weekend, I do think they can do a better job of putting other Big Ten programs in there when it's warranted. I'm not saying throw a Purdue Northwestern game in there when they both have 2 wins, but it was just too much Ohio State, I think. It was like, and maybe that lends it to like the earlier question about Ohio State being the most hated. It's like there's a bit of oversaturation, I think, from the Fox standpoint with Ohio State that probably doesn't help that. So I think there's a better balance that can be struck here that would help Ohio State a little bit, but I think actually help the Big Ten more. And Fox, frankly.
I think in general, well, I don't know if I think in general anymore. I at least previously thought that for the Big Ten, having an arrangement with multiple networks, that they are with Fox and NBC and CBS was a good thing. Whereas now, right, previously they had the Fox and the ESPN ABC split, but like the SEC now is all ESPN ABC, which is the same thing, right? It's all Disney. Mm-hmm. That's all the SEC is. But I do think this is an example of where having 3 networks who have an agreement and have an arrangement, but they also are looking out for their own best interests, hurts Ohio State in the Big Ten because Fox gets the first picks and their spot is noon. Like Fox can't even in the arrangement, like Fox can't do a 3:30 or a primetime game because CBS has a 3:30 spot and NBC gets the night games. So then, but Fox has the first pick on stuff. And all Fox wants is the best ratings. Every week, they want to have the highest rated game they can possibly have. And their slot is noon. And so they take Ohio State. And I don't think they're thinking about the league as a whole or what it does for a program. They're thinking about how can we get the best ratings in week 4? How can we get the best ratings in week 7? And that's it. Whereas if you're ESPN ABC, and you're doing an 8:00 thing, but you're also showing a 3:30 game on ABC and you're moving things around, you're getting all of the benefit regardless. It's more cohesive. It's unilateral. You're not trying to keep agreements. And I think that jockeying within the agreement is because like if you just said like Fox, chill out. Can't you just have Ohio State be on at night? Just chill out a little bit. And Fox is like, what are you talking about? Then it's on NBC. Why would we give that to NBC unless we're getting paid for bypassing a great Ohio State game, right? Like, I think there's some specifics within here, and I don't know all of the TV contract language, but the situation is that they work with 3 networks, but the network that is first up in the pecking order is the one that has the noon slot, and that's the problem. And I don't know that there's a solution to it. But I guess I was slower to this. It just isn't. But I guess the idea that it's hurting, whether you think it's hurting 10% or whether you think it's hurting 80%, I think it's probably a truth what Bill P is saying. It's at least hurting some.
Yeah, it hurts some. It also hurts the fan experience, I think, to never have a night game like that. And we got to see, After a year of a lot of frustration with all these noon games that Ohio State gets to play I get it's a playoff game against Tennessee, that changes it, but like the shoe at night is great. And like we don't get to see it anymore, at least not for a big game. Right. So
Yeah.
like I think Fox, Ohio State, Big Ten should probably get their heads together and figure out a way to make that more of a regular thing than it is right now, because it doesn't really happen at all.
I'm curious when Ohio State, Texas will be. Because again, if we understand
Big
the pecking
noon.
order,
I can tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be big noon.
But for sure, because
well, I guess that's like the thing that's going to be interesting is like every year Fox takes Ohio State, Michigan first.
Yes.
Will it take Ohio State, Texas first?
So now this is actually a conversation we need to have. Because if Fox takes Ohio State, Michigan first, does that open the door to a night game for Ohio State, Michigan? No. If Fox takes Ohio State, Texas first, and now the second pick is Ohio State, Michigan, but now that's CBS or NBC.
But it's not actually set up that way.
No, I know, but you pick the weekend, right? You get to pick the weekend that you want.
Yeah.
Isn't that it?
I think that's right. Yes.
But the bottom line is it not true that one of the reasons Ohio State, Michigan has stayed at noon with no discussion is because Fox has the first pick, Fox's window is noon, and Fox always takes Ohio State, Michigan first.
Mm-hmm.
And if that changes, does not the calculus of that potentially change at least some? That we would be opening? Because if Fox says we take Ohio State, Texas, can you say to CBS and NBC, well, you can't take week 14 next. You can't take Ohio State, Michigan and put it at 3:30 or put it at 7:30.
I think the way it works is that Fox gets to pick like the first 3 weeks or something like that too. Because
they have more than the first pick. Okay.
Yeah, because it was a thing last year where like Oregon, Ohio State ended up being a night game on NBC because Fox traded that week away because it won it like the election week instead.
Okay.
For like the advertising dollars, I guess were more that particular Saturday.
Okay.
So I think of what I understand of the way that it works is like Fox gets the first pick of the week and the first pick of the game within that week, but then it also gets the second week and the first pick. So like it'll just take week 14 and week 1 in some order. And I think I could be wrong. It's a little confusing. There was Joel Klatt did a podcast with a guy from Fox last year that's worth revisiting, I think, to figure out how all that works.
Quick question. Is Ohio State, Michigan in 2025 definitely more valuable than Ohio State, Penn State?
Yes.
Okay. I think so too, but we're talking about the idea that Ohio State's playing Texas, Penn State, and Michigan. They're playing maybe the two best other teams in the country and the biggest rivalry in college sports for a Michigan team that could be revived. Like those are 3 gigantic games. And I'm just curious how they get sprinkled out. So, but maybe the result is Ohio State, Penn State will be at night. Because can Fox get all 3 of them?
The thing that's going to be frustrating for Ohio State fans is that like the game here is going to be at noon and the game in Austin is going to be at night.
Oh, right. Because the home network gets to choose, and ESPN ABC is putting Ohio State, Texas at night in 2026. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Big Noon. But we agree with it as a truth. Number 7, Jim Tressel getting fired for NCAA infractions was the best thing for Ohio State. This is Ryan H. He says it moved Ohio State further forward than Tress would have. We have discussed versions of this before. I agree with this because it helped Ohio State avoid what can be one of the most difficult things, which is what do you do with a head coach who's been very successful, defining for the program, around for a long time, and it might be time for him to go, but maybe he doesn't want to go, but you're not winning as much as you used to. And we've seen it happen a gazillion times. To some degree, we're getting a mini version of that, I think, for Ohio State fans with Ohio State and Larry Johnson. But doing it with your defensive line coach instead of your head coach, I also think it's possible that Tress would not have been a guy trying to hang around until he was 80 as the head coach of Ohio State. He might have just decided to move on when it was like, okay, and maybe that, and I think he had kind of talked about that. He might have only had 2 or 3 more years left anyway, based on his choices. But with both Woody and Tress, their sort of terrible, all of a sudden you're out of here ends actually helped avoid like some of the Bobby Bowden at Florida State or Mac Brown at Texas or kind of things where your most successful coaches, you didn't face that problem. So I think this is a truth.
I think it's a truth that is greatly aided by Urban Meyer being available, right? If Urban Meyer wasn't available, maybe Ohio State would totally fine. They would have hired someone else and been fine. But without knowing that alternate history, I guess. I think this is true, but with the asterisk of thank God Urban was available.
And then the other part of it that I think is like it's Ohio State fans could dispute this and say that they don't think it's true. But even if you do think it's true, you don't have to feel bad about it because Tress is 72 and he might be governor. So it's like he's fine.
Yeah.
Like it all worked out. It's not like, oh, thank God we got rid of that guy. So it kind of worked out for everybody. And he's the lieutenant governor of Ohio right now. I don't think he'd still be the head coach of Ohio State if nothing had ever happened. I don't think he'd be trying to do that at age 72 with all the things that have changed. Not that he wouldn't have been able to change. I didn't get that impression from him. But it's like they broke an arm, right? You broke your arm. It was like, oh my God, Ohio State broke its arm. And then you put it in a cast and it healed and Urban Meyer signed your cast. As opposed to, you got a cough that you couldn't shake for 5 years and the cough made you go 7-5. So like that's, I have had that before. When I picked Ohio State to go 9-3 in 2019, it was just a cough. I couldn't shake it. The 9-3 cough. All right. We agree on this. That's the truth.
Yeah.
This is also one that I feels like is we need to do a show on it. Number 8, Ohio Stadium is woefully outdated and is in serious need of renovations. This is Thomas L. Says Ross Bjork needs to have that at the top of his to-do list. The shoe has turned, and so he's not the only one who thinks this, right? There are multiple people who thought that. So John added on, sorry to go negative right off the bat, but the shoe has turned the game day atmosphere into one that I have zero desire to attend. The bathroom situation is ridiculous. The new scoreboard noise is downright obnoxious. We have seats where you literally can't see the game in B deck. Tickets are wildly overpriced. And then we had another one. Who sent this in? I've lost the name, but this was Chris. And then Chris had to come back and said his wife wanted to add on. But Chris said Ohio State is one part of the program that isn't elite when compared to their peers. There is no reason why Ohio State shouldn't have a stadium every bit as nice as Lucas Oil Stadium, for example. It has amazing history and beautiful architecture, which should be preserved, but it desperately needs the inside completely renovated. And then his wife added on, the fan experience is boring. A large number of ticket sales are season tickets or repeat season tickets. The fan experience never changes. It stinks. A lot of other stuff. So people simultaneously think the stadium is old and falling apart. And then the new things they've tried to do to jack it up, they think is lame.
Mm-hmm.
So the shoe, the game day atmosphere, and the shoe itself needs a redo. Truth or not?
I think it's true. As far as like the game day like programming atmosphere stuff, I think Ross Bjork is one, aware of that, and two, going to try to be proactive about changing it. They did different stuff like for the playoff game, like they played some different music, had some different like cues for the crowds. I think to get back into things. I didn't go to the Ohio State Oregon game, but like I have heard that the Ohio State people who were there were very impressed with like Oregon's game day presentation and just how it was loud the whole time. Like the crowd they were just always doing something to keep the crowd in the game, even when like there wasn't action happening. Now that's also like stadium that's like half the size of the shoe. So maybe it's easier to do that when there's only 60,000 fans or so. But there's definitely stuff that can be improved there. Like no college, at least I'm unaware of a college team that has like NFL style amenities like a Lucas Oil Stadium. But I also know that they're like Texas A&M did major renovations to Kyle Field. Penn State is in the middle of doing major renovations to Beaver Stadium to make it more of a modern college football stadium. I do know like a lot of the sight lines in these 100-year-old stadiums just like don't work anymore, and like the concession situations and the bathroom situations are what they are. I always do find it a bit frustrating. Like some of the stuff that Ohio State has done, it's like, oh, we put new suites in there. It's like, cool. What are we going to do for the 90,000 fans
Right.
who are sitting on metal bleachers and have to wait in the line a half an hour to go to the bathroom? Like, I guess maybe there's only so much you can do within that particular space without like starting to knock walls down and stuff, and then you get to the point of like, do you want to knock down the shoe and build something different? Like, I don't know that there's an appetite for that, but it does at times feel a bit outdated, and the game day presentation certainly seems to be lacking in some key areas.
And it's again the point of Ohio State's like strives to be the best in everything. Like, why wouldn't you strive to be the best in this? This is a separate show. Kansas didn't knock down its stadium, but is doing a big time renovation. The result was they could not play there in 2024, but they are going to play there in 2025. While the rest of it is still done, it'll be a reduced seating capacity, but they were only out of their stadium for 1 year for their redo. Mm-hmm. Northwestern tore down its stadium and is out for 2 years. The Bears, when they redid Soldier Field like 15 years ago, they played at the University of Illinois Memorial Stadium for a year. I'd be curious, like, what Ohio State fans. I think this could be an off-season show. Would you tear down the shoe? I don't think that's what most people are saying. But even if you did it so gigantic, I wonder if it would be a 3-year project, because Northwestern Stadium was like 40% the size, and it's 2 years down and up. And if you're not tearing it down, if you're really doing a big time renovation, and I know they did one, they did one before I got here 20 years ago. These days, if you really want to do a significant renovation, I think it would be at least on the table that you'd have to be out of there for a year. And then what would that mean? What would you be willing to do? Would you be willing to play half your games in Cincinnati and half your games in Cleveland and be okay with that? Or somehow could you retrofit like the old Crew Stadium that's just sitting in Columbus kind of doing nothing right now and try to build that up? The place, I don't know. But would you take some pain for a year for a redo? I think it's probably worth a conversation, because there's enough. This was brought up by multiple people, Bill. It's like if we had done a show, what's the worst thing about Ohio State football right now? I think the stadium might be number one on the list for people.
Can you, I actually don't know the answer to this. Can you like knock down, or what even are like the ramifications of significantly altering something that's like a historical landmark?
Oh yeah.
The shoe is that, right? Isn't it like on the National Register of Historic Places?
Just don't tell anybody. Just like knock it down and be like, what?
I don't know. Like I actually I have a hard time envisioning a world where Ohio State would not play on campus for any number of years while they did something. Like it would have to be, because other program like Iowa, like they renovated part of Kinnick and still played in it. Texas, I think, renovated part of DKR and still played there. Somebody else just did it too. Vanderbilt's been like renovating its stadium and playing in it for years. So like it's doable, but it's like you have to stomach either not playing in your stadium for a period of time, or having your stadium look like a construction site while you're playing there. Right. Because that's what Beaver Stadium is going to be. Like Beaver Stadium tore down the press box and like the top half of the west end of the stadium, or whatever, east end, west end, I can't remember. And they're going to have like temporary seating this year, next year. It's going to look probably pretty crappy for 2 years, but the long-term payoff is a much better version of Beaver Stadium. Like what's the appetite for that in Columbus? I don't know.
Yeah, it's such a relevant conversation, because a lot of these stadiums are around the same age, and the bills come and due on all of them, right? And I don't think there's much of an appetite for tearing stuff down, honestly. Like tearing down the shoe and building a version of Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta that was awesome, I don't think is going to happen. It would be interesting if like Ohio State waited, like if the Browns actually build a dome and Ohio State could play in the Browns' new dome for 1 year while they did stuff. That could be interesting. And again, of all the options, to play half in Cincinnati and half in Cleveland, and maybe you try to make it a year where you only have 6 home games, right? And then you try to get 8 the next year, but you're playing 3, and maybe you could play 2 of the non-conference games against MAC teams, like in a redone Crew Stadium or whatever, and then you're playing 2 in Cincinnati and And like, I don't know, right? Like I would be curious if they're, the fact that Columbus is centrally located in the state, has 2 NFL teams in it and a pro soccer team in the city. There are more options here, I think, than maybe some other places. So just what would be the appetite for how much would you be willing to give up in the short term to make this happen? But this is a good thing to talk to Ross Bjork about in a substantial way. All right. We agree with this. That's the truth.
Yeah.
9. Prior to the 12-team playoff, being an Ohio State fan was not fun. This is something that we've talked about a lot on KOTM. We want college football to be fun for fans. Every single game, this is Eric B. Every single game was on pins and needles, and fans were stressed that they survived that week only to get a shot in the 14 playoff and have a shot at a national title. Now I can enjoy regular season games more because a team like Ohio State is afforded a few mulligans. So, he said, we've had the debate before of whether or not being an Ohio State fan is fun. Prior to this year, I would say no. I believe it is now because Ohio State will always make the playoff and you're just not as stressed about it. I am not going to speak for fans here, but it feels like we've communicated with enough fans over the years where you got this vibe sometimes, Landis, that I don't know if like you loved it, but was it fun? I think this might be true. That it wasn't.
I think it might. Yeah, I think it might be. I guess I'm a little hesitant to agree one way or the other because I don't want to speak for Ohio State fans. And while I value Eric's perspective, I don't want to assume that it's the perspective of every single Ohio State fan. But we've definitely heard it. Heard it enough that like I wonder how much the sentiment is changing and whether it's like whether it's more fun or like simply just like less miserable. I'm not entirely sure. Probably somewhere in the middle. I think there are college football fans for whom like the enjoyment of college football is that pins and needles feeling, right? So those fans will probably have to maybe like reassess a little bit, how they process things. But I guess like I'll just say to this one, like I definitely see where Eric's coming from. Like it makes sense to me.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you didn't want to be an Ohio State fan. It doesn't mean that you wished you were a fan of somebody else. It doesn't mean that you didn't look forward to college football season. It didn't mean that you weren't passionate. It didn't mean that you weren't excited for a Saturday. But if you would have said to somebody, "Oh, did you have fun watching the Ohio State game?" They might have been like, "Not really. I'm not sure fun's the word I would use."
Yeah.
I was stressed out. I was into it. It made me feel alive. I mean, then, again, the thing that's like, usually it's like people like the pins and needles feeling as long as you win. And then it's like, oh no, I didn't like that pins and needles feeling. And when we lost on a last second field goal, then I like ruined my whole week. So this is a continuation of our ongoing conversation. We want fans to enjoy their teams. Sports should be fun. And I certainly do believe that the 12-team playoff has kind of allowed fans to just be a little less stressed out in the way that Eric expressed. So I think we'll say this is true. Doesn't mean it has to have been true for you, but we believe this to be true for at least a chunk of this audience.
Yes.
Last one. Ohio State is the most consistent program in college football. This is probably right. I think this is true. This is from Zechariah, who did like a bunch of research. I'm going to believe the research because Zechariah did it and I didn't. The last 100 years of college football, Ohio State's only had 6 losing seasons. Compare that to the following programs: Michigan 11, Alabama 10, Penn State 12, Georgia 18, Clemson 24, Notre Dame 12, Texas 17, Oklahoma 9, Florida State 15, Florida 23, LSU 19, USC 13. The last 30 years, Ohio State's had 24 10-win seasons. These are the 10-win seasons in the last 30 years for these other programs. Michigan 13, Penn State 11, Alabama 19, Georgia 18, Clemson 13, Notre Dame 11, Texas 13, Oklahoma 19, Florida State 15. Like, the point is, they've had fewer losing seasons and they've had more elite seasons than basically anybody. And we did this at Cleveland.com in the year we did the Indestructible series, and I think we both agree this to be true.
Yeah, because it's a good point to make. It's not oh, Ohio State doesn't lose. They just go 8-4 every year. It's like, no, they don't lose and they go 10-2 or better.
Yes.
Every year. That's what makes it truly, truly special. So this is absolutely true. I don't know how anyone could dispute it. It is as you mentioned, one of the more remarkable things I think in North American sport. It's just how consistent of a winner Ohio State is.
Yeah. So here's a couple other we didn't get to that I thought were interesting. I just didn't grab them. This is Paul N. Even if he proves terrible at it, Brian Hartline has earned this opportunity to be the play calling offensive coordinator. Do you believe that to be a truth?
I agree with
he's
that.
Earned it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do agree with that. Yeah.
I think that even means like, even if you don't necessarily think that that's what they should have done, I don't know that anybody would believe like, well, they just handed it to this guy. It's like, I think this is true too. Again, I'm not sure it's what I would have done, but has he earned it? Yeah, I think he has earned it. This was a very specific football one from Chris B. Philip Daniels' development is the key thing on this team for the next 2 years. The right tackle from Minnesota. Like saying like, that's like, what do they really need to get right? It's having that guy be the answer at right tackle. What do you think of that? Truth?
I think that's truth because I would say it's not be the answer at right tackle. It's be the answer at right tackle this year and then maybe move the left tackle for a year or two.
Okay. That's a good one. By the way, Evan P. had a similar one to Zechariah about Ohio State being the most consistent program of all time. Jeremy S., this certainly could have been a road we went down. The first truth should be that Ohio State creates the best wide receivers in college football. Develops, creates, whatever, from Jeremy S. Do you think that's a truth?
I think that is a truth. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Bunch of other great ones. Here's, I think, another. We got a truth that was CJ Stroud's the best quarterback in Ohio State history. And we got another truth that Justin Fields is the best quarterback in Ohio State history, which made me think another show could be, we tried to come up with as many survey questions as possible for texters with the goal of getting the results to be 50-50 on the responses. Like, what are the most evenly divisive topics in Ohio State football? And I think we could make it a competition where you and I each come up with 10. And our goal is, I'm trying to get 50-50 on this. And then we don't tell the texters who's 10 or which. And then we just let them vote. And if you want to try to game the system and be like, well, actually, I think this, but I'm going to vote this way because you don't know, because you don't know what other people think, right? Mm-hmm. And then we try to come up with who did the best job of trying to create 50-50 questions. Do you think that'd be fun? I think that'd be fun.
I think that could be fun. Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, like catch me on the right day. It's like you could make a CJ argument, you could make a Justin Fields argument, whatever. Of course, people are going to make a Rex Kern argument, a Troy Smith argument, that kind of thing. But I thought, so we'll do a 50-50 show down the line. But we'll wrap with this. And again, thanks to everybody on the text subscriber thing we do that like send in all these great responses. What's yours? Bills, Ohio State football truth. What is it?
So I can't think of maybe the right way to word it, but I think it's this. It's that Ohio State perfected is probably not the right way to put it because that just creates an undue expectation. But I think Ohio State has best figured out / has the best plan and ideas for building a roster in modern college football. Like you start with high school recruiting, which they're still very good at and will always be very good at. The way that they are targeted and selective, but not wholly reliant on the transfer portal. And now the addition of, I think, being strategic with their NIL money to keep borderline NFL draft prospects in school for one more year. And they did it very famously with this past roster. But even like they only had really 3 guys who like were kind of on the fence for this year to be early entrants into the NFL draft. And they got 2 of them to come back in Sonny Styles and Davis and Igbenogson. And maybe there will be years where there's, double digit, that kind of players, and you just can't quite afford that one. Although I bet they will. I bet like that's the area where they will be most aggressive in like trying to drum up NIL funds is to keep those kind of guys on their roster. And it'll be a thing that a lot of teams try to replicate. Like Ohio State is not the only team that recruits well out of high school and then doesn't bring in a bunch of transfers. Like Georgia doesn't really bring in a ton. Texas hasn't brought in a ton this year. There are other programs that do it. I think Ohio State might do it a little better, and then has this thing on top of it where they just seem to have a really nice plan for retention of guys who could go off to the NFL. That I think is like, they just sort of like checked every box, I think, on what you have to do in this era of like freewheeling roster building to be a consistent national championship contender.
The guy who could have stayed but left is Simmons?
No, Judkins.
Judkins. Okay.
I guess Simmons qualifies too, though. Yeah.
But I also don't think it's, I mean, like, you understand why Quinshon Judkins and Josh Simmons didn't stay, but also they're both transfers in. Like the guys.
Well, Josh Simmons is going to be a first round pick. I don't know that I have much expectations of them paying to keep first round picks.
That's true. But also, like, Davis Igbenogson is transferring too, but he was only at somewhere else for another year. Anyway, I think that's right. I think that's a good one. I think that's a good truth. My truth is, I'm going to steal. It's what I was thinking, and then Steve, who's a loyal tech subscriber, and I think I've agreed with him many times before, sent in a thing, and I'm going to read his because it's what I would agree with. Ohio State football is a deeply ingrained source of pride, not only for alumni, but for all Ohioans. East Coast snobs think Ohio is just out there in the flyover boonies. Southerners think Ohio is almost in the Arctic. I have heard more than a few times from people of the South about Ohio who would want to live there. The team, the band, Script Ohio, and the program's great fan base are all a great source of pride that transcends any coach, AD, or university president. Longtime fan, Steve. Living in Richmond for work, heart always in native Ohio. This is what I would say. I think Ohio State football is the most important thing in the state of Ohio. And I'm not limiting that, but I think it's kind of what I said. It's like, I think the sport of football is the most unifying thing in American culture right now. And as everyone watching and listening to this knows, like, there are not a ton of states where there is a single program that unifies the state the way that Ohio State does here. I mean, for instance, if Texas and Ohio are the two football craziest states, in Texas you have Texas fans and Texas A&M fans, and then you also might have TCU and Baylor and Texas Tech and all these other programs where, of course, you have Cincinnati fans and Toledo fans and everything here, but like, Ohio State's above all of that, right? Yeah. And I just think if you went through, and I think sports is an identifier for a lot of cities and states. But if, like, people always are doing these maps on Reddit and stuff, it's like the most popular fast food restaurant in each state or whatever. But if you said, like, what is this state known for? Right? And you kind of went through and had a map of that. And maybe California would be like Hollywood stuff or whatever. I don't know. And maybe New York would be like the Statue of Liberty or something, right? Yeah, pizza. And New Jersey would be bagels, right? I think Ohio State football might be Ohio. And I'm not trying to ignore all the other things about Ohio, but, and I'm not saying that this is unique to Ohio, that it's the only state where you could say this, but I think it's the state where you could say it the most, that a single sports team is the defining, unifying, societal, cultural aspect of the state. I think that's the truth.
I think that's the truth. Yeah.
And it helps that the Browns stink. And it helps that the Bengals are decent now, but like, they haven't, like, there's not, if Patrick Mahomes was playing in the state of Ohio, it might be like, well, it used to be, but everybody loves Mahomes now. But it's, even just the uniqueness of Ohio, that it has two pro sports towns that aren't near each other, but are both 2 hours from Columbus. And so you get, I mean, I'm just explaining Ohio now to a fan base. It's like, Doug, we know. Yes, it's the truth. God, shut up. But if you try, like, I'm trying to explain it to people who don't live in Ohio. And again, it doesn't mean you have to live in Ohio to be an Ohio State fan. But I think if you live in Ohio, I think the number one thing that unites you is Ohio State football. And also the basketball team's not very good. Do we want to do a Jake Diebler show? Is that where we are? Are we not?
The thing, like,
not?
I don't
know.
I just don't cover them, right? So it's like, Do you
Just
want
check in.
the uninformed opinion of a guy who doesn't cover the team? Like, I don't. There are people who cover it daily.
Yeah.
Who can give it better information, I think.
Yeah. I was trying to look back.
Bad losses.
I was trying to look back to be like, find whenever something happens and I think like, no, I think I was on the right side of this discussion. I try to go back and like find me saying it so I can like make a clip of it. And I don't know that I was trying to find like what I said at the time about the Diebler hire. And I don't even know that I said anything, but it's not what I would have done. It doesn't mean it's going to be a disaster, but the Dusty May, Jake Diebler thing at the moment's tough.
It got tougher too because he ain't going to Indiana, which was like, why would you hire Dusty May? He's going to leave for Indiana in here. It's like, well, I guess not.
I guess not. So anyway, maybe at some point. All right. That's it for this episode of Kings of Columbus. Make sure you're subscribed so you get all the stuff here on the podcast. And if you haven't tried it, we just would love to always have you whenever you can make the time on Kings of the North on that separate YouTube feed, that separate podcast feed. We end up talking a lot of Ohio State there because Ohio State won the national championship and Columbus is the capital of Northern football. As always, thanks to our tech subscribers. You guys are the best. We're going to keep doing some of this off-season stuff where we survey you, where we ask for your input. It's a great time to really do that. Make sure we have a pulse of the fan base. Thanks to our producer, Mike Yorostowski, for making us look good and sound good. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Maurice, and that was Kings of Columbus.